Aprilia are one of the last manufacturers to make it to the middleweight sports bike class, but man, was it worth the wait. Oh yes! This RS660 Aprilia, genuinely from the minute I fired it up on my driveway, I was excited to ride it. The sound isn't everything with a motorbike, but this one sounds so good. You can't help but get excited about it. So often when manufacturers make middleweight bikes, especially historically, there was a tendency to just dumb them down a bit too much in the worry of, oh, people aren't into really hardcore bikes, they want usable stuff, and I can see why they do it, but it always leaves them a little bit disappointing for the sort of purists among us who like something they could actually get excited by. I've been wanting to ride this RS660 for a long time. I've heard a lot of good stuff from my friends about it, and it hasn't disappointed on the road today. The engine sounds great. It's a good balance, 100 horsepower, which again is a good number for the road. The sort of roads I ride, it's good, it's more than enough. If you can ride bigger, faster A roads, it's still good, but you kind of got to thrash it a lot more. You're not going to get it to just crack out the corner with quarter throttle. What I've been most enjoying today, apart from the noise it makes, is what they've done with the chassis, because they've done a reasonably relaxed riding position. The bars are pretty high, the pegs are fairly far forward. It's a sporty riding position, but it's definitely on the comfy end of that. But the chassis is genius because it's got a fairly aggressive turn in it. It changes direction pretty quickly, and it's stiff without being harsh, and that doesn't come that easily. So you get that nice sort of sports bike, loads and loads of feedback, loads and loads of feel from the tyres and the suspension and what it's doing. But then when you hit a massive bump you didn't see, it's not crashy and sharp edged. It seems to be able to cope with those hits, which means charging down your favourite bumpy B road is an absolute joy. It's properly playful like that. I'm a big fan of how they've set it up, riding position and then chassis wise for the road. The engine sounds amazing, and it doesn't do anything wild. It doesn't have like a big peaky top end. It doesn't have a massive shove in the mid-range. So if you're gonna compare it to things like the R9, which is arguably not in this class, but at the price you're gonna mention it, the R9 has got a much more noticeable engine. You've got that big mid-range surge, which is a joy. This doesn't have that. It has a sort of good engine note and decent shove everywhere, but no sudden wild spikes or exciting bits. That said, whenever I've wanted to muck around a bit, it's always been quite happy for me to kick it down a gear and hold it on the stop, and you can go first, second, third on this without immediately going to jail. I do think it's quite helpful. As well as that, they've managed to get the feel of the bike right for me. Nice, direct, cable operated clutch, brakes with enough bite to keep you happy when you're on and off the brakes on little roads, but not so sharp that they feel like they're going to tuck the front. The rider modes, there's some rider modes in there. There's commute, dynamic, individual. I think you can get track modes for it, but it's quick to switch through them, and you can also change all the modes to be what you want. So you can turn all the wheelie control and traction control off easily, and you can change the throttle response. I rode it most of the day on the sort of middle throttle response, but then the dynamic one, I've put it on for the ride home, and it's a little bit more rough, a little bit more exciting. That dash setup, the switch gear, how easy it is to use, they've done a brilliant job of that as well. I haven't found anything that's been awkward or irritating or difficult, which is a rare treat for motorcycle electronic packages. No, I think Aprilia has done a superb job of this. It's very Aprilia. They are historically able to make fantastic sports bikes, and ones that are sometimes a little too harsh on the road, but in recent years they've sort of pulled it back. But more importantly, they've built bikes that feel nice. They feel special in some way. Feels that little bit more special than some of its competitors, and it feels like a bike that even when you've stopped riding around like a hooligan and thrashing the pants off it everywhere, it's actually quite nice to cruise around on. See there, sheepies. They've done a brilliant job of making a really fun, engaging road bike that still feels pretty special. I am dying to ride this thing on track now.
Bimmoto are just one of the companies that support us here at Bike World, and they're the people that help us make these videos week in, week out throughout the year. Now, their approach to insurance is kind of to tailor it to you as an individual, which means they can do you motorbike insurance, van insurance, travel cover, and they can tweak the policy to give it the bit that you need that matters most to you. You've got a load of optional extras on there as well, and best of all, when you pick up the phone, the people on the other end tend to know what bikes you're talking about. If you say a Fireblade, they know what a Fireblade is. They'll ask you which year. They do multi-bike discounts, and one of my favourite things is the lack of a mid-term adjustment fee. So if you want to make a change to your policy, change the bike, there's no extra charge. 98% of their customers actually recommend them. I definitely do. I've used them for a long time before the Bike World sponsorship, and I've always been happy. Check out Bimmoto on the link below, and you can support the companies that support us here at Bike World. Okay, let's recap. In fairness, Aprilia has had a sort of mid-weight sports bike before. In fact, they're kind of legendary for it. The RS 250, an awesome V-twin two-stroke super sports bike that I think if you had one now, you would never sell it. They are sublime. They're also really expensive for a second-hand bike because everyone who's got them, they damn well love them. But those legendary sports bikes of the 90s, we look back on with such fond memories, but we're really good at remembering the good bits and forgetting all the really bad stuff about them. Like the fact that they were ridiculously hard work if you rode them for any length of time on the motorway. The fact that you had to rev the living daylights out of them to go anywhere. The fact that actually outside of a good road on a good day, they were a bit of a nightmare to live with. I can hear you saying there's a few hardy people out there that are like, no, it was fine. And it was fine when we were in our 20s. It was great when we were in our 20s. Not so much now. I was that person. I had a Honda NC30, a VFR 400. I rode it everywhere. I commuted on it. I rode it across the whole country in the pouring rain. I rode it in the middle of winter. That was my transport. And I didn't know any better. And then eventually someone put me on a Honda Dominator, and I realised you didn't have to have a numb bum and broken wrists every time you rode a bike. Now these days there's a lot more pressure on a middleweight sports bike because it has to deliver what we all fondly remember as crazy wild super sports stuff and what the new generation riders are looking for, but without making us hate riding bikes at the end of the day. No, the pressure on middleweight sports bikes now is hugely different because they need to deliver that excitement, that punch, that thrash the living daylights out of the thing and go crazy that those of us who rode them before in the 90s really remember and miss, and new riders are kind of looking for in their
excitement about a sports bike. But on top of that, it has to be usable. It has to be comfortable to ride in a 50-mile-an-hour average speed camera limit for 10 miles. See any road in Britain. It also has to be economical, because there's financial pressure on people, and I'm sure there was financial pressure when we were kids, but we didn't seem to care and we wasted all our money on fuel. But if someone told you that for your 20 quid weekly fuel ration, you could go twice as far, surely you'd take that, wouldn't you? On top of that, we need to have things like ABS. That's the law, you have to have it now. And we need to have traction control. Those things are cheap enough and easy enough to achieve at a basic level. But if you want them to be safe and let us ride fast and do cool things on bikes, that takes a lot of development. Development is expensive. But the bike can't be expensive, because if it was expensive, it'd be a superbike, a 1000cc one at 20 grand, and it'd be a different category altogether. This area of bikes we've been looking at recently is very, very hard to get right. And I think Aprilia might have done it, if not better than everyone else, certainly very nearly. The RS 660 in its base form is just under 10.5 grand. They do a factory version for more money with Öhlins and shiny spangly bits and cool paintwork, but the base model bike is the one we've tested here. For your money, you get quite a lot of kit on the Aprilia. You get an up and down quick shifter, you get traction control that you can dial up and down or turn off, you get wheelie control that you can turn on or off, and you can turn it off so that you can do this, and you get ABS where you can switch the rear wheel ABS off, which means you can do this. And all of that makes Chris a very happy person. More importantly, those modes and the modification of those rider modes, no manual, no instruction, and I figured it out within about 30 seconds. Now, I've spent a lot of my time working out how to turn the traction control and ABS off on motorbikes. It's kind of a thing that goes with my job, but easy to use, simple to use, clear menu, and enough information on the dash to keep you happy. But for me, none of the miles of useless stuff that gets in the way and annoys me. So far, good job Aprilia. Then jump on board, and some of the stuff I talked about earlier about comfort and practicality balanced with sportiness, they've got that well too. The riding position initially when I got on felt suspiciously comfortable. I know the new gen of super sport bikes is all about higher bars and lower seats, because that's what the kids love these days, but yeah, it did feel quite comfortable for a sports bike. But when I got on and rode it, I was quite relieved to find they hadn't gone for the super squishy, lovey-dovey, make it feel nice for a novice to do their A2 license test on, in the way they've set the chassis up. The suspension is firm, like sports bike firm. And then when you hit a big bump, it's not harsh, it's not crashy. So it's somewhere in between road bike and full-on super sports weapon, but in a way that to me immediately felt confidence inspiring in a riding a bike fast kind of way. It is stiff, you can feel the bumps, you can feel what the tyre's doing. When you're riding slippery, bumpy, horrible back roads, you kind of know that the tyre's hopping off a bump or about to drop into a dip, or you can feel that stone that you rode over that you didn't see. That level of feedback to me is what makes sports bikes exciting to ride. Now, I've no doubt that if you take this thing onto a track and put slicks on it, you'll start to complain that the suspension is a bit soft when you're riding it at 10/10s. But for the road, I was pleasantly relieved. The comfortable handlebar position wasn't reflected in a super squishy, comfy chassis. It's still got a proper sports bike chassis, and I like that. The biggest thing that stood out when I first jumped on this bike was the noise. I'm not the world's biggest parallel twin engine fan. I like them, I get them, I understand why we have them. They can be accused of lacking a bit of character from time to time. And that's just not the new gen of parallel twins. That's all the way back in time, people have moaned that parallel twins are good, but a bit flat and a bit characterless. Not so with this one. Certain they have definitely fitted an extra piston somewhere or a sound resonator. It just sounds really good. Now get out on the road, and I found myself drawing comparisons with the R9 and the Panigale V2 very quickly, more so than things like, say, the R7 or the GSX-8S. That's the kind of category my brain has sort of put in this bike into. It has that same special feeling, it has that same bit of extra spirit about it that doesn't make it the most sensible purchase, but definitely makes it one you want. The engine drives really well everywhere. It doesn't have any spikes, any pops, any extra bits in its power. I'm going to flick back to Panigale V2, really hard hit off the corners, loved that. R9 has that mega mid-range of a 3-cylinder engine, and because this bike is, in my mind, good enough that I'm comparing it to those two, that's where it falls back. The engine doesn't have that same special feeling. But then actually, if you compare this bike to its peers at price point at that capacity, it's amazing. It's amazing that I'm even talking about it in the same sentence as an R9 or a Ducati Panigale V2. It really does a giant killer job. Riding it out along the roads today, we took it to all our favourite spots, and it's a bike that makes you want to push it harder. That was one thing I noticed. It didn't feel twitchy, it didn't feel out of shape. I had it jumping and hopping and skipping and bouncing from the first 10 minutes of riding and felt happy, felt confident on it. On top of that, when I finished being Mad Chris and doing silly stuff, it works really well at 3/4 effort riding. For just cruising around the lanes, it felt really, really nice. The chassis is stable, the chassis steers quickly, but not on a knife edge. Yeah, I'm struggling to find something I didn't like about it. In fact, the only thing I found all day that I didn't like about this bike was the back brakes started squeaking after I used it heavily for a while. And every time the brake squeaks a little bit, I then open the throttle and it makes that noise, and I don't care about the brake squeak anymore. That's something I can live with when you consider the price of this bike and the performance it offers elsewhere. Now, the next job for me really on this is to get it onto a track, because while this class of bike isn't about track riding, that's why we booked it and did a road test, I'm intrigued to see just how good it can be on the circuit. As an out-and-out road bike, a sports road bike, if we're going to compare it to everything available out there, if it had a little bit more punch, a little bit more response in the middle of the engine, that bit more ability to just crack the throttle and start the thing moving and lifting wheels, I think it would probably be my favourite road bike. As it is, it's just pegged back from that, because the class it's in, the category it's in, the capacity, 105 horsepower is incredible to pull out of that, but I'm not comparing it in its class. I'm looking at all bikes, and that's the only thing that knocks it off the top spot for me. If you're looking for this capacity of bike, this class of bike, or even your first big bike, absolutely phenomenal bit of kit, that Aprilia. It's taken them a very long time to bring us the Aprilia 600, the Aprilia middleweight sports bike we've wanted. Ever since I was involved in sports bikes, I can always remember there being little teasers and little, oh, Aprilia's going to build a 600, and I'm sure they built some prototype things out there somewhere, but finally we've got one, and that thing has been very, very much worth the wait. Aprilia does small capacity sports bikes really, really well.